it. That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Welcome to The Goods Oil. Today on our show, I'm joined by Simon Jenkins, Chief Information Officer at Datagene. Simon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Now, Simon, Datagene is an independent and industry-owned non-for-profit organisation that is responsible for developing modern tools and resources to drive genetic gain and herd improvement in the Australian dairy industry. Can you give our listeners a quick snapshot on the organisation's history to date?
Yeah, so I joined the precursor to Datagene, an organisation called ADHIS, which is the Australian Dairy Herd Improvement Scheme. And they were around for about 30 years, and their job was really to look at providing genetic gain and genetic improvement for Australian dairy farmers. Datagene came into being in July 2016. And as you said, it's an industry-owned organisation with members from the Australian Dairy Farmers, the National Herd Improvement Association and others. And we have a board made up of a number of representatives from across the industry, Australian dairy farmers within our industry, and we have a member from the meat and livestock industry as well. And the Datagene's really only getting through that kind of startup phase as an organization, and we're now getting into the meat of what we do, and we've been continuing sort of that legacy of ADHIS, but developing our own sort of take on how we deliver value to Australian dairy farmers. And key to that has been our development of our centre software and our central data repository, and just recently a product that is we're developing called DataVat, which is effectively a farmer-centric portal, which will allow dairy farmers access to all their industry information.
Great. And is it Datagene or Datagene? What would you say?
Well, I would say Datagene because I'm English.
Fair enough. Now, your career started out in business intelligence at Motorola back in the mid-90s. So BI services would have looked a little bit different back then. Can you tell us or take us through your career history and sort of how and why you ended up in the IT industry?
Yeah, so I lived in the centre of the known universe, a wonderful town called Swindon, which if anyone's ever visited it wouldn't know that that's a complete lie. The Motorola moved there, and it was seen as a good opportunity for a bunch of young people to sort of learn some new skills, and I was one of those keen people. And I joined and started work predominantly building the base towers for mobile communications. So the mobile comms was really just beginning to take off, and back then we were on 3G, and we were building the new networks for that. As part of building that factory, Motorola had a few issues with things like their factory control systems. So the things that controlled the lines that were manufacturing boards and for the base stations, and they needed people to move into kind of a pseudo IT role, which was supporting manufacturing but looking after the factory control systems. And that's what really gave me my foot in the door. I was keen enough to put my hand up and say, I'll give it a crack. I was really, really fortunate at Motorola. I had some really good managers, and they invested a lot in me. I didn't go to university, but I had, over the course of maybe 7 or 8 years at Motorola, I worked out after I left there that they probably invested somewhere in the region of 60 or 70,000 pounds in industry training. That I was sent on Microsoft courses for servers. We were moving from NT4 back then, and we were moving into I think just the early versions of Oracle 7. We were just coming off of 6 into 7, SQL Server 6. So we're going back a bit, and then we had this wonderful piece of technology called Business Objects, which had really just been launched as Business Objects 4.5, I think, back then. So going back a bit, and I said the investment was there in me, and I just took the ball by the horns and put my hand up for everything that I could.
Great, and the opportunity came up and you've grabbed it, which is great. Fantastic. So, so from Motorola, you then moved through to...
Well, I see. This is the thing: when somebody invests that much time and money into you, you start to think that you know your stuff, right? So I decided that as things were beginning to mature in the BI space, that I would go out and sell my services as an independent consultant, and I worked for a number of organisations, and I found out I knew less than I thought I did, but I was pretty good at concealing that. So obviously that set me up for a career to be able to work as a consultant. So I turned my hand to just about anything I could around data and business intelligence. Obviously got that kind of sexy title just about everywhere you went, because it was the new thing, and everyone was interested in what these tools could bring. But I ended up doing everything from installations to training courses to going in and building business objects universes back then, and helping different departments inside organization learn how to use these tools. But it was scary times as a younger consultant, because like I said, I didn't know everything that I probably should have done to have been putting myself out there as an independent consultant.
Great. And you worked for a couple of big organisations, Capgemini, just a few others there, Bright Star. Your roles are around those two organisations?
Yeah, so I guess if you look at, I kind of look at how lucky I've been able to work with some large organisations in the UK. I worked for Ford under the Jaguar Land Rover banner.
Okay.
And then I've worked for Goldman Sachs when I first got to Australia. Actually, the reason I came to Australia was to come to work for Business Objects. I was not having much luck finding a bit of work in the UK at the time. My partner sort of was working in the horse racing industry, and one of her colleagues was a Kiwi. And he said, "I'll have a look at seek.com.au. There's probably some work in Australia or New Zealand if you're interested." And I had a look, and within 2 weeks of applying for a job, I was living in Australia, and that was working with Business Objects.
Yeah. Wow.
But Bright Star was a really interesting place to work. The CIO that hired me at the time was a guy called Perry Lanaway. Perry was just more than just a good CIO. He's a really great guy. He recognised that, coming from Capgemini, that I'd had a fairly broad exposure to a lot of different clients, and I had a lot of different skills there as well. And he brought me in as the lead of their business intelligence unit. But his promise to me on hiring was that, get a good job done for me in this first year, and let's really take things on to the next level. And I want to move you up to an IT director's position. Yeah. So that kind of sold the role to me. Was I was backing myself in that I could make a big enough impression in that first year that I could get that promotion. Yeah. And they were true to their word, and that gave me the confidence to sort of move into more senior leadership roles.
Yeah, fantastic, great story. And so now you're at Datagene, and they offer several different services. A couple off the bat, you've got some data solutions that you offer. You have some apps, some industry-led type initiatives happening. Can you provide a summary of some of these for our listeners?
Yeah, so most of we have some work that we do ourselves around genetic evaluation. So when I joined maybe 5 years ago, nearly now, 5 years ago next May, and I had an interest in farming, as I've lived on farms for a long time myself, but I didn't speak any of the language that quantitative geneticists speak of. So we're working with some really smart guys that do the breeding values and do the analysis. So a key part of what we do is actually providing those breeding values and do the analysis to produce something that we call the Australian breeding values. And farmers that herd test their animals get these breeding values, and it allows them to make an informed decision on their breeding plans to get a rate of genetic gain with their livestock. So every year, the daughters are better than their mothers. And they convert their food better. They produce more milk. They produce more protein, more fat in the milk. They're just better animals. And they've seen that gradual rate of genetic gain over the years. So that's core to the business of Datagene. We also provide apps to the industry. We have an app which is called the Herd Data app, and that allows farmers to record observational information on farm.
Yep, gotcha.
Sorry.
That's all right. All good. So we were just talking about the apps.
Yeah, so we developed a body condition score app for Dairy Australia. Now they originally developed that app using an external third party, and they built that in a cross-platform app tool, and we redeveloped it in native, and added some additional functionality to that app, and that app allows farmers to apply a score against an animal based on a preset criteria. So the animal can be rated, on a scale of skinny to fat, if you like, and that helps the farmers make some decisions with regards to how to manage that animal. We have a project that we're doing for Dairy Australia around animal health and welfare, which is really very important. We get the dairy industry is sometimes misunderstood, and the work that we do around animal health and welfare is incredibly important. And I'm really interested to see what we can do with this project. We're working closely with Dairy Australia, but also closely with the milk processors. We have projects that we were looking at around natural capital as well. So those projects, there's an element of environmental management and social responsibility that comes with farming, and both the animal health and welfare and natural capital projects kind of align to that. So a lot of the tools that we develop aren't just purely technology tool. They're not just there for technology's sake. They actually have a practical purpose, and we hope that what we build, our farmers get some significant benefit out of.
Yeah, and that's the main thing, isn't it? The farmers at the end of the day, to help them, get come up with some decisions using some of the data and systems that you're using. So vitally important. So the general public and the people outside of the agriculture industry, they're starting to notice farmers using things like drones to collect data, GPS tracking and guidance systems, motion sensors, etc. The ag tech industry in general is really taking off.
Yeah, it really is, and we're starting to see it's becoming similar to BI back in the early part of my career. BI became cool. It wasn't, data became cool, and that wasn't something that I ever thought was going to ever happen.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see ag tech go down that same kind of path. People are really interested in some of the things that we're doing. Yeah. You're right. The use of satellite imagery, drone data collection, organizations like John Deere, who most people will know, the big green tractors. Yeah. John Deere are probably one of the biggest IoT companies in the world right now. Yeah, wow. They have so much money invested in things like you said, GPS tracking, guidance systems. It's phenomenal. All of that means to an IT nerd like me is just bucket loads of more data to analyze and figure out how to bring all that stuff together to add value to the farmer. Because at the end of the day, it's interesting. It's really cool stuff to play with. Yeah. But if no one's looking at it and no one's making smart business decisions off the back of the kind of analysis that my team can do, there's not much point in it.
No, that's right.
So, the development of our central data repository is the first time that anywhere in the world, some other countries have tried it, but we're pulling together all of that disconnected data from all of these different sources, from the on-farm software, from the kind of data you can get from GPS tracking, from our own breeding value calculations. We're putting it all into a central place, which allows us to do some really interesting cross analysis of that data set, so that we can really give the farmer something of value.
Yeah, and look, is there still a challenge with collecting that data from some of these farms are in pretty remote areas? How do you actually get that data if it's coming in at volume?
Well, to be fair, not a lot of that data does come in at volume. You're right; it is challenging with farms being not always on the network, or, not always available. I think as we see, the rise of things like 5G, and we start to see, I mean, where I live, I'm on the NBN through a wireless connection, and you're seeing more farms connecting that way. Once we get that truly connected farm, I think we can add even more value, and we'll be able to get that near real-time information. A lot of our partners we're working with, we're developing near real-time APIs for their software and services. So that means a farmer will be able to, at some point in time, and not so distant future, be able to make some changes in those apps and services that they've got access to. And when they look at their reports through DataVat, they'll actually see near real-time update of that information, which will give them an immediate call to action. So I'm pretty excited that in the next year or so, we should start to see some real benefit in that space. Yeah,
fantastic. It really is exciting stuff, and there'll be more technology come along. Do the farmers, how are they keeping up with all this technology? Given a lot of these farmers haven't been brought up in a tech savvy world, are they going okay?
Look, I would say that you can.
Yeah. So just onto that question. So you got farmers, and some of these farmers haven't been brought up in a tech savvy world. How are they keeping up? Are they going okay?
Yeah. So I would say that you can split our farmers into different segments, but we have a number of farmers that are probably closer to retirement than they are starting their career, but they are still using our apps and services, and they still get printed reports, and they will still pour over it over the coffee table with a highlighter pen. Some will still record information on a piece of paper, and whilst they're in the dairy, and they might go back and enter it into the computer at the end of the day. But we do have the digital native making their way into the farming industry as well, and education centres like Marcus Oldham College are training their guys not just to be farmers, but data managers as well. So that sort of promises some pretty exciting opportunities as well.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? It's a new skill, managing data, and who would have thought, farmers would be doing that, 20 years ago, and now now they're it's part of their curriculum in learning how to be a farmer. Fantastic. Now, Simon, we also have a segment called the Goodsies Fast Four, where I ask 4 hard-hitting questions in 30 seconds. Are you ready to go?
Let's try. Yeah, of course I do.
Righto, let's do it. Okay, question number 1. What's your go-to order at your favourite restaurant?
Curry of some description, I would say. I like spicy food, so it'll probably be the spiciest thing on the menu.
Excellent. And what do you wish you had known when you had started out in this role?
Sorry, in this role at Datagene?
Yeah.
I don't know, really. I think I came to the Datagene role when I was at a point in my career where I felt that I could give quite a lot anyway.
Yeah.
I guess the stuff that I've had to learn has definitely been around understanding the language of genetics. So, but I don't think there's much of an opportunity to be able to learn that beforehand. So it's definitely been a challenge there.
That's it. Would have taken a few years to get an understanding of that, I'm no doubt. And what's something you've failed at?
Well, many things. We probably don't have long enough in a podcast to go through all of them. Look, I guess managing work-life balance is probably, at least in points in time in my career, that's always been the biggest challenge, and I've often failed at it and just immersed myself too much in work and not taking enough time out.
Fair enough. And what's something you're curious about right now?
Well, I've actually this week decided that I'm going to go back and do a master's, and I'm going to do a master's in leadership. Wow. I had thought about kicking on and going and do a PhD, and I had spoken to Deakin University about that, but I've kind of got my head around the idea that I'm doing my master's in leadership right now.
Yeah.
And I think once I've done that, I'll go and do a master's in entrepreneurship and innovation, because that's something that's really key to how I think.
Yeah.
It's something that I just want to go and formalize. So
Great.
definitely curious about finishing that.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, that's all for today's episode of The Good Soil. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Simon, for joining me today.
Well, thanks for the offer. Appreciate it.
And join us again next week when we bring you another CIO to the Good Soil podcast and find out how they are making a difference to this world we live in. See you then.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.